Hi, welcome to the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum. Before we begin to play this recording, we wanted to offer a preface. As in most efforts in life as humans, the best way to improve what we do is to learn from our mistakes. Despite our best intentions, what you're about to see will include some classic examples of difficult conversations that can be had between a consultant or a contractor and a client. I only wish I could say that we planned it this way. Without any feedback from our guests, we recognized it right away, and we reflected on it for days. As we're dedicated to helping faith congregations, it is our mission to be more compassionate. As a result, we've humbly offered our guests, and they have graciously accepted, a second offline meeting, a do-over. But here's how it went on the air in its entirety. Hi, welcome to the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum. And this is episode 12. If you're joining us live on YouTube or playing this back at a later time, welcome. If you're live with us on Zoom, you get a chance to participate by submitting your questions and comments in our Discord, and to participate in the post-show, where we can have a voice Q&A and rather casual conversation. If you'd like to fully participate, you can find the registration information on our Facebook page. This growing international and multi-faith community that's now more than 400 strong is you, of course, from congregations of all sizes. At the technical level, the domination is transparent, and because we all want to communicate with our communities. And we are but one of a related set of communities. Leo here on our panel hosts a show on Sunday afternoons at 3 p.m. Eastern Time that's more focused on Jewish worship. Tell us what topic you have coming up this week, Leo.
We are covering ProPresenter and how to use that to deliver liturgy onto the screen, in the room, and remote.
Cool, thank you. If you're an educator at any level, a teacher or administrator, interested in technology for educators, you want to check out Office Hours on Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. There are several other shows that some of our panelists also participate in, dedicated to various media productions and production technologies. Look for links in the Discord under Related Shows. And these are all interactive communities, because it's not just you learning from us, we're all learning from each other. The information that you share with us during the show and on the Discord helps others in the community. This interactivity engagement is more than half the value of these communities. Engage in active discussions, information sharing, Q&A with each other and our panelists all week long. You'll find future show agendas, past show recordings, and special announcements on the Discord. It's also where we take your questions during our live show, like right now. You can ask a question anytime during the show. Just write it in the channel named Live Questions, which is under the category named Live Show. If you'd like to comment or add something or add to something that we're saying, put it in the show chat channel. So the questions are easier for us to identify. We'd rather not mix chats and questions. Speaking of questions, it's time for the question of the day. What we want to know is, how does your church plan to maximize the opportunity for your live stream to reach millions of people? How does your church plan to maximize the opportunity for your church to stream to reach millions of people? You can put your answers in the Question of the Day channel. So we've been asking what specific training topics you're interested in, and we're starting to spin some up. Audio training has begun on Monday afternoons at 3 o'clock. The first was going through an analog mixer audio chain, and it's being taught by Mark Plukas. What do you have coming up this week, Mark? Or next week, rather?
Monday, 3 o'clock, we will be discussing microphones and microphony. Is that the correct pronunciation? We're going to talk about the types of microphones and their application, especially within a worship service.
Great. Yeah. Microphones are important because it's the first link in the audio chain. It's the very first thing that comes in, and you want to get it right the first time at the very beginning of the chain. Otherwise, you might have garbage coming in, and you can never clean it up again. I also know that there are a lot of people watching here who are both knowledgeable and dedicated to the things that we talk about here on the show. And if you'd like to contribute to the panel discussion, all you have to do is get here an hour early on Thursdays. We let people in to join the panel between 6 and 6:40 Eastern Time for preparation and sound check. At 6:40, we close the panel, but you can still come in and listen to our conversation before the show begins. And if you'd like to get a behind-the-scenes look or even participate in our planning process for each show, then join us on Sundays at 4:30 Eastern Time. Same place, right here. Same Zoom information, and that also goes for Mondays, same Zoom information. We can get into some fascinating discussion on Sundays, so come and join us. Now, as attendees during the show, your microphones will be muted throughout until the post-show, when we have an informal and open Q&A session. Attendees will be able to unmute their microphones, and we can actually have a voice conversation. And remember that we don't use the Zoom chat channel. If you want your questions read, please put them in the Discord in the channel named Live Questions. If you're watching on YouTube, you also have the opportunity to join our Discord and participate. If you'd like to comment, I said that already. And finally, if you're new to Discord and would like a tutorial on the interface and getting around, let us know and we can schedule a time for you. All right, today we're going to be doing a needs assessment evaluation for our second contest winner. This one in the 100 to 200 seat category, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Gwinnett in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And next week, we're going to present our recommendations from the first assessment we did for the UU Church in Chapala, Mexico. So before we get to it, I want to thank our panelists today: Joanna Lovell in Pennsylvania, Jay Paul in Maryland, Mark Plukas in Massachusetts, Leo Mindell in London, Crystal Vokes and Robert McKinnon, who are both in Florida. And from our congregation, our guest congregation today, we have Russ and Jan Tadeo, Christina McQuain, and R.J. Rice. Welcome, everybody. So let's take a look and see what we're going to be doing today, shall we? Several weeks ago, we held a contest. And what we offered was for congregations to fill out forms that we had prepared in advance that asked a whole bunch of questions about the congregation, about the church, about the sanctuary, about services, about the ministers and the music directors and the music program, with the idea that if you were interested, if the churches were interested in figuring out or having us help you figure out how to equip your church to do live streaming, interactive live streaming, you want to be looking at, well, what cameras should I buy? How do I control those cameras? How do I interface audio? What about projection screens? All these different things. What about streaming? What about software? What accessories will I need? How do I work this stuff? So we offered this service that we are acting as consultants, and taking the information that you provide to us, we will help you figure out what your options are and make recommendations.
Hey, Marty.
Marty, can you just give me can you swap the host?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much.
Sorry, we both interrupted you. Didn't mean to do that. And Russ and Jan Tadeo, is that the correct pronunciation, correct? All right. Good job.
Okay, Leo. There you go.
Thank you.
And now I can't share my screen.
You can. I've done it for you.
Okay. There we go. All right, so this is a sanctuary that was, this church was built about 30 years ago, I think I heard. And the sanctuary seats about 176 people. There are about 134 members, plus non-members, friends, and friends. And I believe there's an interesting story about the building of this church. Russ, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? You'll have to unmute. Oh, he can't unmute.
They aren't co-hosts. I think you need to make them co-hosts so they can unmute.
We just got it.
I thought I had, yes.
Okay, we're now able to unmute. Thank you. So I think the story you're referring to, Marty, is just that the congregation is just turning 40 years old. And for the first 10 years of its existence, it, like a lot of congregations, met in other spaces. And I'm not even sure what they all were, but you can imagine if you've known anyone, any congregation who was at its beginning. And about 30 years ago, this congregation who'd been meeting in other spaces for 10 years decided to build their own building. And they created they designed a building which we kind of think of as our blue boat, which is sort of as an homage in a way to Peter Mayer's Blue Boat Home. But it is a metal building, but it is a lovely building that was designed by the congregation. It was built, the superstructure, the main parts of the structure were built professionally, but most of the finishing was done by members of the congregation. So they were driven, and they really put a lot of energy into it.
We also call it our TARDIS because it's shaped a lot like the blue police box from Doctor Who, and except on its side. And people walk in and say, "Oh, it's so much bigger inside." So.
Wow, is that right? Wow. Okay. That's pretty special. I mean, how can you get any more congregational involvement than actually building the church? That's beautiful. All right. And so
I think Crystal's going to drop the link so that everyone can pull up this document on their own if they want.
She just did in the Discord.
And which channel did she put it in?
Show chat channel.
Show chat channel. Thank you.
all right. Thank you very much, Crystal. All right. Yeah. So if everybody could, all our guests can mute their microphones, that'd be great. So you plan to web stream on Zoom, which is great. And primary attendees will be members and friends, of course, who can attend in person. And secondary attendees would be, outreach to new people unfamiliar with Unitarian Universalism or your congregation. That's great. This is a wonderful opportunity to grow your congregation. Expecting about 50 viewers when in person and services begin again. That's great.
What?
Go ahead.
Oh, we have about 50 to 60 households on Zoom. That represents a lot more people than that because those are households. So we have usually between 70 and 90 people in the building on Sunday morning when we met in person.
So of course that number, that is a total speculation about how many people will continue to watch remotely. We just really don't know, of course.
Right. Well, this is, we start small and we grow from there. We really don't have any idea how many people are going to be watching us down the road. So it's all speculation at this point, but we prepare for growth.
Yeah.
And, when that happens, it'll be beautiful. So, how would you characterize your worship services? Traditional with more congregational participation than typical traditional services, including enhancements such as all-age worship every Sunday, people sharing reflections and musical gifts, singing together 4 or 5 times every service, usually accompanied by the pianist. Candles of Compassion service element once a month, where the minister roams the room with a handheld mic used by people who want to say or joy or sorrow. Wonderful. So there's movement at times where the minister will walk around the room. That's important to know. Minister usually speaks from the pulpit at the beginning of the service, but then moves around. Okay, great. The choir section, which is adjacent to the pulpit in the corner of the sanctuary, has 17 seats next to the piano. You might have an occasional guitarist. Any other instrumentation besides piano and guitar that you use in the room?
Occasionally when we can, but not right now. At one point we had a house band, but that kind of split up. So
Occasionally, we do have a flautist who plays.
yeah, we have flutes, we have violinists who play sometimes.
Hey, Russ, is that the place where your choir is? Is that also where the coffee house artists stand as well, in that same place?
Yep.
Right.
Okay. I'm hearing pinging from somebody. It's
Working on it.
okay.
You're trying to turn it off. I'm not sure why it started, but
Okay. That's
All
okay.
right, thank you.
I just want to make sure we know that. So your coffee house series has a band that would be in the same spot where the choir would be.
well, that's true. But it's not. I mean, that is a very unusual gathering these days. We just don't. We
Sure.
don't have it very much.
We're thinking down the line.
Yeah, we're thinking down the road. Could be a year from now. You're going to be using the same equipment that you get installed next month, or in the next 2 months. So, anticipating what events might come back to the sanctuary. Was your coffee house very popular?
Sometimes.
It could be, depending on how it was constructed. If it was a touring performer, when Peter Mayer played, for example, it was pretty darn popular. Yeah, but
It was, yeah.
yeah. But if it was an unknown, we might have maybe 30, 35 people.
Okay. Where would you set them up? Joanna mentioned in the corner where the choir would normally be, but is
generally
where they would be?
What we did was reset the chairs so that the corner there became the focus. We actually had a couple of spotlights that someone had inherited from someone that they built 2x4 tripods and set in 2 corners of the room so that they could add a little extra focus. But yeah, basically resetting the chairs and using the choir stage, I guess we'll call that, is what we would do.
All right.
Actually, just to let you know this too, I actually brought a PA in that I bought just for this purpose because what was existing in the church really wasn't good enough to handle a performer.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So the focus would be in the corner of the room. That's good to know too. All right, let's see. Rentals. It's always an important part of church life, church economics. Anticipating renters who will pay for streaming capability and a staff person to run it. I'll say, good to know. Let's see. Right now you have an analog mixer, and there seems to be a powered mixer and a smaller secondary mixer. We'll get to that in a moment. Typically using 7 to 8 microphone channels. You have a standard copper XLR snake running up front.
Right. Just to be clear on that part, Marty, the question asks for the maximum number of inputs that we've used.
Right.
That's not typically what we use. It's usually the smaller number. You know, it's
Right,
usually
but when we plan to do a system design, we don't plan for typical. We plan for maximum. Actually, we plan for in excess of maximum because we want to build in room for growth. That's provided that it's economically feasible. All right, and let's see, wireless microphone for the minister, handheld microphone at some points for in-person services. Right. Okay. We have some wired microphones. I'm just going to scan through this for relevant information. Audio playback has been CDs, flash drives, sound files, okay? And all of that is going to probably change your workflow a little bit for the better. And not using ASL interpretation services. Are there any plans to?
Not at this time. We're talking about how to get closed captioning going for those who are online, but
Okay.
we don't have the budget for sign language.
All right. So there's no built-in projection at the moment, but there's a tentative plan to do that. All right.
No, projection, just to integrate this, we have used projection for years, but it's been off a cart. So, and another angle of that is that the minister uses a remote to actually operate that herself. So she's been doing that ever since we started doing the projecting.
And do you have a pop-up screen that you set up then?
Actually, we project it on the wall, which is happens to be a good color to do this, but you know, a screen or something or a wall that was painted to do it correctly would probably be better.
All right, and you've been, let's see, for recordings, you've been recording audio on CD and in Audacity on an older computer. Okay. And Overflow Rooms. We have pictures of the sanctuary that we'll take a look at. What overflow areas do you have?
The office, the kitchen, we would like to do is sorry, and the nursery?
Nursery has a speaker. Yeah.
Nursery has a speaker.
There's a speaker in the minister's office, but yeah, those are the 4 speakers.
Okay. And any intention or desire to distribute video as well as audio?
Yes. Yeah, as we mentioned there. And also someone had mentioned putting it in the lobby, which I think is a good idea. That way people who enter know what's already happening. And not only can they be encouraged to come in, but they can see what it is that they're entering.
Great idea. All right, so let's take some pictures. Look at some pictures of the sanctuary.
Aww.
Yeah, very nice space. We see the choir chairs set up in the far right corner.
That sound of longing when you brought up the picture. Oh.
Remember that place? We see the choir chairs set up there and the pulpit in the center under the stained glass window. Really, really nice. Now we see a round table there in the middle, and we're going to get to that one in a moment. We see ceiling fans and this interesting ceiling line. Look at that. We have this peak in the center. So that's going to be interesting to deal with. Because existing, yeah, look at that. Isn't that nice? So one of the curious things about your space is the way that the chairs are arranged. You do church kind of in the round, don't you?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like people to see one another and see that, we're a community.
Yeah, of course. Of course. That makes a lot of sense.
It's actually supposed to be the shape of a chalice if you had an overhead shot.
Is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. All right. Beautiful.
And that table that's in the center there, the circular table, that is actually the chalice table, as it's referred to.
Of course it is. Yeah, the
And
chalice
that's where
table.
I preach. I use a music stand on the other side of that, between the pulpit and that table, to preach from. So I don't preach from the pulpit.
Oh, okay.
And there's lighting directly down on that table. Looks pretty.
Yes. LED, all LED lighting.
All LED lighting, really nice.
Does the
Okay.
pulpit get used for anything?
Yeah, I do the intro there, and I'll intro songs up there. When we have people do reflections, they'll come up there and speak from there, and I'll do the offertory introduction from there, things like that. But yeah.
Do you use a mic on a stand at the location where you preach from, or do you wander around with a handheld?
I have a
or-
headset. I have a headset microphone.
Headset. Okay, thank you.
All right. So here are the choir chairs, right over here. And on this back side of the room is where your control desk is right now. I think we have some better views. So we have a powered mixer right here. And we have a CD player recorder. And another amplifier receiver here.
Yeah, that's actually the main amplifier for the sanctuary space, which you can see is really just a stereo amplifier.
Mm-hmm. All right. And another little amplifier here.
Yeah, and that's the one that takes that actually feeds the speakers that are extended outside the sanctuary.
Oh, okay. Out in the lobby.
Yeah, well, not the lobby, but the offices that are included: the nursery, the minister's office, the
Kitchen.
the kitchen, the administrator.
All right. And we were curious about this device. Is this a feedback eliminator?
That's an equalizer, I believe.
It's an equalizer.
I think so.
Oh,
Well, it might have
we
been
don't
a
know.
feedback eliminator, because he did get one and put it in there.
Well, there is one, but I think if you go up to that upper picture just for a moment.
I thought Jay identified this in our Sunday meeting as a feedback eliminator.
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
He brought up a picture of it.
Right, because there's a compressor and above it, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
we did notice a compressor up there.
Okay.
So this is your auxiliary meter,
Or
mixer rather, and
Yeah.
it's, we're curious as to what inputs these were.
Okay, so we have two Bluetooth transmitters and receivers, and so that the receivers go into those two channels.
Bluetooth
Plus, my hair-
transmitters.
Yeah.
Not my
Well, so in other words, we'll have when in this case, what we've been using it for most recently is the laptop that is on the cart that runs the projection. Okay. Maybe playing a video or something like that, and the sound is sent back to the audio system over the Bluetooth connection.
Right.
Okay. And how well does that work? Are there any audio latency issues?
We haven't really had that kind of problem in that way. No, it's worked pretty well.
The only thing that you can't do is if you're doing something that involves people getting up and doing something like a flower communion. And if I'm running a Bluetooth video during flower communion, for instance, people walking around mess up the Bluetooth. And
Oh,
mess up
right.
that connection. So I don't use a Bluetooth thing if I'm going to have people walking around.
Okay. All right, now, here we see the existing loudspeakers that are in the room. I understand there are 3 of these on each side of the room.
Right.
So this is where the slope of the ceiling starts to go up to the peak.
Yes.
And but we don't know what kind of loudspeakers are behind these grills. Is that right?
Well, that's true. I didn't have any way. I asked around, but I couldn't find any record of what they are.
Okay.
Hey Russ, I'm curious. Have you ever had a peek up there just to see, are they like rectangular boxes suspended from the ceiling, or are they conventional ceiling tile speakers?
You know, I'm happy to check for you, but I haven't done it up to now. But I can certainly put it up there.
Okay.
Can we make a note of that?
And we keep them off all the time. So,
Well, so it doesn't really matter, is what you're saying.
well, I'm just saying we keep them off for some reason that I am not quite sure.
I'm sorry, did I misunderstand it? It's the corner speakers you were talking
Yeah.
about, Jay?
No, it was
Oh.
what was in the ceiling.
Okay,
Oh, I
that's what thought.
misunderstood.
That's what
I
thought.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, we use those. They're
You
on.
use those, right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, sorry.
On a side note, this does not appear to be a plenum ceiling. Do you know for sure whether or not it is?
What?
A plenum ceiling.
Is it the return air for the air conditioning or heating? I see vents with diffusers, but I haven't seen any grills for the
All
return
the
air.
returns are out in the hallway, and only vents are on the inside
Excellent, thank you.
of the rooms.
I'm glad you knew that.
And I see.
Learned that last week, so
Now I recall from the Q&A portion in the earlier part of the document that you do have some problems with feedback in this room.
yes. Sometimes there has been problem with feedback.
Okay. I mean, there is occasionally, it has been, I think, really only during the roving handheld, right?
Yeah, but I think whatever we did, that feedback device or whatever, something has made it better.
Okay.
But we still are just careful when I'm taking the microphone around. If I get near those speakers, I'm aware. It will occasionally still happen.
All right.
And there actually was some advice that the person that used to run sound, who's no longer with the congregation, or he might be actually, he can't attend.
No, yeah.
Are they?
No, go ahead.
Anyway,
Irrelevant.
part of the instructions used to be if feedback started to become an issue, that we could try going to the corner speakers and start using them instead, just for that portion of the service. So whether that's relevant, don't really know.
Marty, can you show those corner speakers? Because I didn't even know that they were actually speakers.
While you're getting there, I'm going to
Sure.
interject a little bit in that hanging
let's
quarter
see.
mic, that hanging choir mic.
Yeah, we'll get.
My son has worked tech in there, and he's the one who's been over my shoulder. He's telling me that is what causes feedback much of the time as well.
The choir microphones.
There's only one.
Jay,
That one, yeah.
It's just about like where you put the level. It starts popping a lot if you.
There you go.
if you get
that box there.
There's one of those corner speakers.
Yeah. So is
right over
that
the
a
choir.
speaker in the corner? That's
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And there's one in each corner, in the front corners, 2 front corners.
Yeah. Oh, you
Go
missed.
back down, you can see both of them in that. They'll go up one.
Marty, go up, Marty, up. There.
Up one more.
Up one
Less
more.
coffee,
To
Marty.
the left.
Oh,
There you go.
they
You
are.
can both
There
go
they
there.
are. I was
Switch
looking for
caffeine.
that picture.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So I'm going to take this slow because I don't want to make everybody dizzy.
Thank you.
Too late.
Yeah. There really is there's only one hanging choir mic, right? There's not two. It's not a stereo pair.
So there is 2.
There are 2.
Oh, but you only took a picture of one?
No, they're,
Well, I only took a picture of one, yes, because I wanted to get as close as I could because I couldn't identify the model. So
Okay.
Okay. That's cool. So
right.
where is the other one in relation to that one?
right near it.
it's a few feet away. They sort of bisect the choir area.
All right.
Do they X, Y? Do you know how they're set? Well, it doesn't. That's okay.
No, they're spaced.
If you pause there, you might be able to, no, you
I
can't.
see one hanging
There's
right
one, yeah.
here. And I think,
Is that the shadow of one right where your cursor is?
Yep.
Right there?
yep, one right
Maybe.
there.
Not sure. I think
There's
that might
one
be a
right
picture
here.
hanger. That's a picture
Okay.
hanger on the left.
Oh,
Yeah, I would say they're about 5 or 6 feet apart, both hanging from the ceiling, and they're
It
both.
was to the left of the diffuser was the second one.
Okay.
The diffuser. Where's the diffuser, Mark?
It's right there next to the ceiling fan.
There.
Oh.
And there's one.
If you look between the ceiling fan and the diffuser, you'll see a little hole in the corner of the tile, and you can just barely
Well, yeah,
make out
right
the
here.
microphone. Nope,
Oh,
to
the
the
other
left.
one.
Right, keep going, up, left. Oh my God,
there
this
it
is
is.
like drawing
I
a
see it.
circle with
There
an
it is.
Etch-a-Sketch.
A little bit to the left, Marty.
little, right there, right there.
Right there.
My
right
left.
there.
There it is.
Your other left.
At the top
It is.
corner. So right there and right there. Yeah, okay. All right.
So, Christiana, what did your son want to say about those microphones? We should give him some time.
That's okay. He actually now left the room, but he was
Okay.
saying they're what causes a lot of the feedback over there. They tend to pop once in a while, and that tends to cause the issue.
Interesting. Okay.
And
So
when they turn them up too high, they'll start to pop a little bit.
Yeah.
Interesting.
that makes me beg the question: is your choir not, does the choir not produce enough level in order to be heard through the sanctuary without the aid of the sound system?
We're a pretty small choir, but I really don't know the answer to that.
The sound system, I think, primarily is also to be able to capture the choir on the recording.
That's, yeah.
So even if they could be heard in the sanctuary, they will not be heard on the recording.
Okay.
They might.
Well, all right, that's an easy, I think a relatively easy thing to fix is to send choir microphones to the recording or the streaming feed only, but not sending them to the loudspeaker system. Okay, thank you.
And do you think it might be a gain setting too?
No, if you've got open microphone in a fairly close proximity to a ceiling speaker, the microphone is kind of, well, I wouldn't say far away, but you need to increase the gain for the microphone to pick up the choir. You just may be running out of acoustic gain, and you're going to incur feedback. But if you don't need to put the microphone or the choir through the sound system for sound reinforcement, you only need to feed them to the recording and the Zoom feed. That becomes a non-issue. We just don't route the microphone to the speakers.
Right.
The popping sound, on the other hand, is talking about a completely different problem.
That's a
I think
different
there's
issue,
a
yeah.
wiring issue or a static discharge issue, something like that going on.
Could be air blowing on it, right?
Failing, yeah, it could be air blowing on it, could be a failing phantom power supply.
Sure.
Now we can potentially increase the gain before feedback with different microphones and different speaker placements. And so we'll get to that
Yep.
after we finish going through the document. Lighting controls on the wall. Okay. Perfectly fine. They're switches, not dimmers.
Oh, there are dimmers there.
There's a dimmer knob on the right.
Yeah, dimmers,
Yeah.
the slide dimmers
Rocker.
right next to
Right.
the switches. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Very good.
Different banks of them. Different. Do they control different rows?
They control
Different lights, yeah.
and the overhead chalice table light, the backlight for the window, like that.
Oh, that's a light behind there. Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah, I was wondering if that's an external wall, an internal wall.
It's an external wall, but there's no window behind it.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a light.
It fooled me.
Two lights, actually.
Oh, you fancy people, you.
Yeah.
Well done. All right, and that's the end of the presentation. Great.
That's the end of the doc.
Okay. I'll keep this available, but I'm going to stop the share for now. Set that aside.
Forget the participants can put their questions into the Discord chat channel called Live Questions, if you have any.
All right. One of the things that we did not find addressed in your information is about your internet service and your local area network.
Right. Well, the internet service, and I actually did a speed test with an Ethernet connection a few days ago, and it's DSL. It's asymmetrical. It's 10 up and 50 down. So it's not great. And as I'm sure you know, DSL can have a congestion problem at the nearest router, where those DSL lines are all connected. AT&T, who is that vendor, that they don't have fiber going to that location. So from them, I can't get anything faster, or we can't get anything faster.
Is there broadband going by from like Comcast or somebody like that?
We are trying to investigate that now. Actually, they're kind of a pain to deal with. I don't know. It's probably a surprise to everybody, but
Actually, I've had Comcast since it hit my street, I don't know, 20 some odd, 30 some odd years ago. In my town, Comcast has been amazing. Right now, I'm getting 450 down and 45 up on a residential circuit. So
That is pretty amazing.
yeah.
How much did you say you tested? What was the speed you tested at, Russ?
50 down, 10 up.
That's pretty tight.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. It's not great, but it should be sufficient.
I mean, we did stream 3 services before we moved operations to our house, and
We don't really know what
we don't know what it was like for other people. So
We should probably go back and watch.
If you're not streaming at 1080, if you're streaming at 720, and there's not much other internet network traffic on the building, 10 up should be sufficient for a good stream.
All right.
But you won't have a lot of space for anything else to go on. And at 50 down, you should be able to get by with that. But DSL, is basically a modem-based, tone modulation on telephone wires. Is not the best, and it's certainly not consistent. So some days it could work better than others. Some days not so much.
So would we be how tight would that be? Would we need to tell people in the county who are there in person, like, don't run your phone during the service, or
Well, we could prevent that by making them by not giving them access to it.
Well,
actually.
yeah, just curious. We have people who like to, while we're in the service, if I name a book or a song or something, they'll go and buy it, or they'll send messages on Facebook or
No.
Twitter, what's
But
going
they
on.
can do that over their phone connection. They don't need.
Oh, their cell connection. Okay.
Yeah, if they're connected into Wi-Fi on your network, do not let them in. You're going to
Okay.
have just enough bandwidth to push like a 720/60, and I don't even know if I'd. Well, you got to keep in mind, it's like every 1 megabyte is 8 megabits. That's your math right there. So with 10 up, you're looking at 1 point what? So that's really low. You want to be like 15 to 20 when you're streaming, and 10 is half that. So
The other question is, are you streaming through a wired connection or over your Wi-Fi?
Well, we've been using Wi-Fi.
Well, let's just think about this for a moment. In the times that we streamed from the building,
It was Wi-Fi.
It was Wi-Fi, but we would not do that if we were.
We're using Ethernet cable at our house, so
Yeah. Wi-Fi will slow you down even further.
yeah.
yes.
Okay, so we want to take a look at the way your local area network is built. So the router, the switches, the Wi-Fi's, want to make sure that they're all up to speed and capable of handling the network traffic.
It's pretty simple at the moment. There actually are no switches. There is basically the Wi-Fi that comes out of the router that AT&T provided, basically, and the only thing that is connected by Ethernet at the moment, I think, was probably the archived computer that we have, because that's used for something else as well. But yeah, that's it. There really isn't any other local area network.
Okay. There may be a need for a switch because you may have several new devices that will need network connections.
Yeah, right on.
All right. The next technical priority on our list is lighting. Well, is audio really? Is audio. So.
Can you put the doc back up, Marty?
Yes.
Were there any other questions about audio?
Well, I have some questions about audio.
Oh,
So my first question is would you say you have consistent coverage from the speaker system as it exists, that that you don't suffer from hot and dead spots, areas where audio drops out because you're not getting coverage from a loudspeaker, or are you hearing differences in the tonality of the system in different seats? So there's sort of two questions that are interrelated. Is it equally the same level around the sanctuary where you want to provide coverage to the congregants? And is it consistent in terms of frequency response? You don't have places where it's shrieky or tinny, and other seats where you're having a hard time hearing high frequency information.
Or a particular location where it's just boomy because it's trapping all the bass in the room.
RJ or Christiana, can you speak to that? Because where I am, I'm a
I would say it's pretty even inside of the sanctuary. The speakers in the childcare area and in the kitchen specifically, I would say, are very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they're turned up full volume. But yeah, for the most part in the sanctuary, I've sat in most of the places, and I feel like it's pretty good.
And you're delivering sound levels like from speech that would be equivalent to conversational speech from people sitting, maybe 3 to 4 feet apart.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Those kind of
I would say
levels.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And how does music sound when you play it through the speakers?
RJ, Christiana?
Music is normally pretty good. Sometimes it's hit or miss, but I don't know that that's related to the speakers.
And when we're saying music, do we mean like the pianist, choir music?
I would start with pre-record. If you play any pre-recorded music, that would be the first place to start, because then you're removing the effects of microphones and instruments and sound sources. So I would say if you played any kind of program material through the sound system, does it sound full bandwidth? Does it sound consistently like it's well represented as you hear it through the speaker system?
Yeah, I mean, the only times we really do that, I guess, are when I'm showing it, when somebody's showing a video in a worship service.
Okay.
And I think it comes through pretty well.
Pretty well. I would say it's not great. But sorry,
Christiana?
Christiana?
No, I was going to say, I want to say yes, it's relatively consistent. There are not issues that I would point to as far as that's concerned.
Does it sound good to you?
Yeah,
Yes,
does it sound natural?
Okay.
it sounds full. Yes.
Okay.
So let me back up to something Russ brought up earlier, and that was you brought in a sound system to support coffee house functions. So that begs the question, where did the existing system fail in order to be able to support that as well as services?
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess where my feelings about that come from, and the reason that I brought that system in was because it actually was Peter Mayer once who was playing, who at another congregation, and when I showed him the sound system he was going to be using, he kind of turned a little blue and said, "Gee, you got anything else?" And I dragged a PA out of the closet that somebody had left there, and that's what we used. So it's always been my assumption that the inherent system would not be good for performances.
Mm-hmm.
That might not be true, but that's why.
So you're saying that decision was
You can plug in more instruments, and you have more control over because you bring your mixer too. Yeah. So,
but that's his reason for asking.
Yeah. So I think it's just easier to hook up instruments and all that because it can bring it right up next to the stage, and it's not, you're not trying to feed it all through that really crazy.
So the mixing, the rig that you brought in was not to make up for deficiencies in the loudspeaker and the front of house system, was to make up for the entire front end, the mixer, the capabilities of the mixing, et cetera.
I would say that's true.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things that struck me as I was going through this information and thinking about, Jan, how you move around during services, and about your comment that there are some feedback issues. I'm looking at where the speakers are placed and what direction they're pointed in. And there's 3 speakers on each side, and they seem all to be pointed at the center of the room. Where you're operating from, Jan. So you're walking around the center, you have the chalice on the round table in the center of the room, you're wearing a headset microphone, you have a handheld wireless microphone that you may be
I'm carrying,
passing to people who are sitting in chairs. And wherever you are, there's seems to be a speaker pointed right at you and your microphone.
Yeah, so you see where those tables, we're storing some tables there between the rows.
Mm-hmm.
The row in front of those tables, if I bring the microphone there, we might get feedback.
Yeah.
Sure, because it's directly below the speakers.
It's right under the speaker.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I ask what microphone you're bringing there?
That's both my headset mic, which might be muted, depending on the sound person who's on duty, and the handheld microphone.
Do we know what the handheld microphone is?
Yeah, it's
Bluetooth.
listed.
No, it's not. No,
Not Bluetooth. Sorry, not Bluetooth.
I think
It's listed up above. It's listed.
It's wireless.
Yes,
It is wireless.
It's a Shure. We're looking specific.
Yeah.
Shure SM58. No.
That would be the
Stop.
wired mic.
Yeah, no.
Unless it's a 58 capsule on a wireless.
Which
But
is
I don't know what the
58
wireless. There it
pulpit
is.
microphone is okay. So it's not listed there, but
It's
if
not
I go
listed.
down to the rack,
Yeah, I'm trying to see if it's lying on top of the rack or something.
No.
No, I know. I checked that.
yeah, no, it's in here
Had a
somewhere.
picture of it?
There's the receiver on top of the rack.
Yeah.
There's one of the receivers.
The one on the.
2 of the receivers. They look like maybe Audio
That's my
Technicas.
receiver.
No, it isn't.
It isn't?
Because
Where-
Because I was at our house,
Yep,
right?
Audio Technica.
yeah, that's it. That's right.
Okay.
And there's another one next to it, to the right of the Audio Technica. Is that an antenna behind, or something else?
It is, but that might be the
Hearing assistance.
yes, the hearing assistant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which you noted that was becoming problematic. I noted in the text as well.
Yeah, so it's the wireless mic, the handheld is listed in the document. It's ATW T341B from Audio Technica.
Got it.
And the capsule is an SM58.
It is? Okay.
Yeah. And so what we had discussed was moving those loudspeakers to someplace else. So the loudspeakers are here up in the corner and here up, along these sidewalls.
Just can you clarify how many speakers are actually in the roof?
3 on each
4?
side.
Well, yeah, only the three ceiling speakers per side are utilized. The corner speakers are not.
Okay, there is on both sides the ceiling speakers on both sides.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of a distributed system, all pointed towards the center of the room.
Are those the only mics that you have, Russ? Just those 3? Just a lav or a headset and a wireless and one wired?
And 2 choir mics.
There's the piano.
I'm sorry, what?
There's also 2 choir mics.
2 choir mics, yeah.
Right, the 2 choir mics. So how do you mic the piano?
There is what I think is an SM58 underneath the piano.
Wired.
Wired microphone that goes to the XLR snake that's underneath the podium.
Right, and there's a gooseneck on the podium too, right?
That's the
Yeah.
PV, yeah. Yep.
Oops. Okay, that's it for my audio questions, I think.
I was just going to ask you, you said that you get the feedback when you are in the seats where the tables are currently being stored.
Mm-hmm.
Does it happen on both sides, or is it only on, do you have it when you walk on both sides of the room, or do you typically only ever walk on one side?
I can't remember it happening on the other side, but we had those were turned off for a while, weren't they?
No, it was the front of the room.
Oh, okay. It's been so long, and
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know it's been so long for all of us. It's just trying
Are
to
you talking
remember.
about the feedback?
Yeah.
I remember it happening on both sides.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks,
RJ.
RJ.
What we haven't established is whether the times that you experience the feedback, the sound person had just forgotten to mute your headset, or whether it was truly coming from the handhelds.
It
Right.
is not, to my recollection, it is not a function of the sound tech. It's from the handheld.
Right.
That's my recollection of.
Okay, so you know that it's not her headset that's feeding back, it's the handheld that's
not my
feeding back.
I believe it's her headset.
What's that?
I don't believe it's her headset. I believe
Okay.
it is the handheld that's causing that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only when the handheld is being used.
My point, though, is when the handheld is being used, she's walking over wearing a headset, handing the handheld to somebody. If her headset is hot, it could be the thing causing the problem, not the handheld. But Christiana is saying, to the best of her knowledge, it's not the headset. It is actually the wireless that's causing the issue.
Okay, how we would know this is.
And I would agree with that too, because it's happened when it wasn't Jan walking with the
That's what I was gonna
microphone.
say.
Okay, that's critical. Thank you.
Okay, so if the handheld is feeding back, that could simply be too much gain to the microphone.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Yeah.
normally a
I
58
think
capsule solves that, but yeah, there's something else. Yeah, it's just too close.
I think the thought is that you've got typically when you're handing the handheld to congregants for them to speak.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And I would guess that invariably it's going to be you hand it to somebody who doesn't speak who speaks very quietly, and then the next person, so the person doing the sound has to turn them up because they can't hear.
Right, or the microphone.
They're holding the microphone way over here.
Right, or down below.
Down here.
Or they're expecting their belt buckle to pick up. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's-
exactly. And so you're having the sound. You're just that whole
Yeah.
issue.
Well,
And
they
given
like
that the-
Rockstar.
Given that the SM58 is a highly directional microphone to begin with, if the head-worn microphone were also on, that's an omnidirectional microphone that's much more sensitive to feedback.
Mhm.
And so the combination would be deadly.
Well, except the gain of the headset microphone is going to be substantially lower because it's so close to the talker. So it could be that, you know, if two microphones are open at an equal level, and, you know, just you happen to be in a position where the microphone picks up a lobe from the speaker, certainly that's a consequence of, you know, location, possibly, and how much gain you've got applied to the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a note, an SM58 is really useless past the distance from the end. You know, if you put your fist there, an SM58 is kind of useless anywhere past there. It drops off dramatically in sensitivity and thins the voice. So it becomes a human behavior thing. Teaching the congregation, no, hold it up and talk into it. You know, you don't have to touch your lips to the grill, but with a 58, if you can get them close to the microphone, gain it down, your problems should go away.
Can I just ask two questions? Marty, where did you see that there's an SM58 capsule on the wireless? Because I didn't read that. And also, Jan, what type of headset mic are you using? Because that's not listed either.
Line six?
it is. It's on there. It's a line 6.
Oh, line 6 is the name of it?
Yeah. Well, it's the manufacturer,
Okay.
and there's no other place where it's printed, but.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Yeah, you're right, J-Lo.
Sorry. Yeah.
Says SM58 wired microphone for the piano.
Yeah, that's the
And the puppet
SM58, right?
Okay.
Right. So we're not quite sure what that could be. For all we know, it's an Omni capsule. I doubt it, but it could be an Omni
I
capsule.
doubt it. If it's an Audio Technica, it's
Yeah.
one of their capsules, which are also pretty good.
It might be the quality of the headset too.
I don't think there's any easy way to determine that
Right.
from this documentation.
Sure.
All right. So, for
I just have
audio,
one quick
let's-
last question. Also, you said earlier that that the speakers that are on the walls are turned off. Or,
Well,
was
no,
that
that got confusing. The speakers in the corner of the room are
Corner.
hardly ever used. The ones in the ceiling are always on.
so why are the ones in the corners hardly ever used?
Well, really because they have never hardly been used since I've been there for the last 10 years. I don't really know why. I don't know how long they were there. I don't really know anything about it.
What I'm trying to work out is that, you know, and the others will explain it better, but, you know, sometimes you either drive one set of speakers really loud, or you keep the other ones, you balance the two sets.
Well, I'll speak from some experience. And when I joined my congregation, the sound system, to be charitable, wasn't really set up correctly to begin with, and we had multiple sets of speakers. I don't know if anybody remembers little 4-inch drivers in a box called an Oratone that recording.
Oh my God.
That recording studios used to put on the console so they could simulate what a car audio system sounded like. So you'd play the mix through the Autotones and say, yeah, this will sound okay in a car. Well, whoever had been responsible for putting sound system in my sanctuary lined behind the sound booth, there's a little shelf. And Oratones were distributed on the shelf. Then there were also JBL speakers that were aimed down from beams at the front of the sanctuary, and all they ever did was generate feedback. And they used both sets of speakers at once, and it was absolutely horrible. So, you know, when I joined the congregation, I kind of let on, you know, this really isn't very good, and I know something about sound, let me help you out. And the first thing I did was turned off the Oratones, they went away. And then re-aimed and re-equalized the JBLs, and then eventually replaced them just that I had speakers up front that, you know, actually covered the congregation. So, and I forgot the other speaker. Somebody in the congregation forever ago kind of built their own Bose knockoff speaker and hung it from chain above the choir. I never heard it. As far as I know, it's still there. It hasn't fallen down, but it was just one of those things. Nobody could really tell me, oh, yeah, that was there. Well, I think we put it there so that we could use it when we set up the room this way, but it's not connected to an amplifier. We don't even know if it works. I have a feeling every congregation has a
Has
story
that.
like
Has a
that,
history, yep.
and they'll never get the back history because whoever did it left or forgot.
Yep.
I saw pictures of one sanctuary. There are no fewer than 6 abandoned speaker cabinets littering the walls.
Right.
They would just put up another one set and turn off those and leave them hanging there because nobody wanted to take some spackle up there and fill the holes, you know?
Oh, I've been in sanctuaries that where they'd had multiple contractors come in to like update the sound system, but none of the contractors disabled the sound system that was there before. And so there were 3 different pairs of speakers all active at the same time. None of them were balanced. None of them were time aligned. And the congregation was saying, I don't know why, but I just can't understand any of the words.
This is why we can't work out how the pyramids were built, because nobody's there to remember what the user manual was.
Too many construction managers got their hands in them.
All right, so let's get back to business.
Yeah.
So for audio chain, so let's look at the audio chain and see if we have everything covered. We've got microphones. We talked about microphones. They go into a mixer. We looked at the mixer. There's some sort of processing. We saw that there was a compressor somewhere in that rack. We saw that there was distribution to different parts of the building using multiple different amplifiers. We see that there's some connection to, there was a computer on the desk that we saw has some recording capabilities. Maybe the streaming encoder was in there, which is all going to get redone anyway. And then we saw the loudspeakers. Oh, we also saw, back to the beginning of microphones, we also saw wireless microphones, so wired microphones, wireless microphones. We saw which direction the speakers are pointed. We have some sense of what they sound like generally. And we have some sense of the interaction between the microphones and the loudspeakers is causing some feedback in the room.
Well, let me also mention so we know there's basically a Pioneer stereo receiver functioning as the amplifier driving 6 ceiling speakers. Is that correct? Three per channel. So I guess my assumption is that these speakers are probably wired. That they may be wired in parallel. I have no idea what kind of load they present to the amplifier, and it looks like the only signal processing really is the 5-band equalizer for equalizing the speakers, right?
Yeah, it's probably the case. And and just to, not that this makes a big difference, but
Sure.
The way they actually wired the audio coming out of that stereo amplifier was that the left channel, it's either the left or the right channel, I'm not sure which, is for 1/2 of the speakers. And when I say 1/2, I mean like the front, which would include 2 ceiling speakers and the 2 corner speakers.
Oh no, really?
And then the other one does the back ones, which is the last
Good
2.
grief.
If you look at the box at the top, it actually says corner front,
Mid-room.
mid-room. Sorry,
that's
that's
right.
what you're-
That's right.
Yeah.
So right.
It looked like mushroom to me, but I couldn't quite read it.
I forgot. So there's a speaker controller so I take it the output of the amplifier feeds the input of that controller, and then from that controller you select what speaker you're going to drive.
Yeah, that's what that is. Yeah, it's basically
And
speaker switch.
are those push-button switches, or are they volume controls?
Those are push buttons.
They're push buttons. Yes.
Push buttons, yeah.
And also, just to point out, that picture that's currently up, you can see that on the bottom right there, that amplifier. You can see where it says back speakers, front speakers.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's when you turn that mixer control left or right, not mixer.
That's like a pan pot. You're
That's right. That's what
panning left or right, right?
Exactly. And
And this is a stereo amplifier, not a quad amplifier, right?
right.
Right. Okay.
And you haven't released the magic smoke packets in this thing yet.
But But Mark, they've got one of those the standard fit, the do not touch buttons.
Yeah, the do not touch button. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Everyone has one.
So, okay, so you're taking the left and right output of an amplifier, going into the left and right, I guess, input of the monster speaker controller, and from that controller, it looks like what corner? You've got back and front as left and right, and then you have corner, front, mid-room, back on the controller. Is there another amplifier feeding in the room, or is that it? That one amplifier's that's doing everything in the room.
My understanding is that that's it.
Okay. Let's not spend too much more time on this.
Yeah, we know
because
that's going away, so we may as well move
right,
on.
We're going to blow this all up anyway.
We
How
won't be
tall is the
recording
building? Do you have any
TVs
windows that
anymore.
open?
Hang on a second. I think Rob had a question. Do you have a question, Rob?
My question was to RJ. He mentioned like the volume was low in some of the remote places, and I was curious if that was due to, in his opinion, if that was just due to older bad speakers or the line loss going to those remote places.
Your level is kind of low, Rob. I couldn't hear your question. There you go. So can you ask your question again real quick?
Yeah, I'd put it in the chat, but it was to RJ. He mentioned that the volume was low in some of the remote places. Is that, in his opinion, is it low due to the quality of the speakers in those remote places, or because of the line loss?
Oh,
I couldn't tell you.
like the kitchen.
Does anybody know if that amplifier that's driving those spaces is a 70-volt amplifier or an 8-ohm amplifier?
Yeah, I was going to say, are those speakers run through?
Oh, that was.
Yeah, they must come from somewhere else.
It's coming from this
Right there.
little,
That little
this
20-watt tuber.
amplifier here. Yeah, it's an 8-ohm amplifier.
Yeah.
It's just completely
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Well, no. So the question, it's a fair question. If the speakers are, if they have transformers on them and they're expecting a high impedance source and they're not getting it, yeah, you're not going to be able to drive those loudspeakers with that amplifier. Now, again, how many speakers are on it? Are we loading the amplifier correctly? Does the amplifier match to the loudspeakers? Those are questions you need to know. It's conceivable that what you have could drive it at the right level, but without more information, we couldn't figure that out.
And how far away are they? What gauge is the wire that's connecting them together?
I wouldn't imagine that loss in speaker cable is going to be a significant factor here.
No, and
I've
I don't know
seen
if it
these
makes
kind
much
of
of a
speakers-
difference, but each one of those speakers has a volume controller on it as well.
Okay.
And they're not very far from the sanctuary. They're not like at the other end of the building.
I mean, are we like talking 100 feet distance between the amplifier and the speakers?
No,
Not even?
not even.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking it's probably, unless you're running those speakers on, a 26 gauge cable, even so.
You should get enough juice just to fill the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, if there's a 40-foot spool of cable in the ceiling somewhere, that
Yeah.
Even, yeah, there are a lot of places I'd look for a problem before I ever got to cable length.
When you play with the volume control on the speaker, does it go zzz, zzz, or does it go click, click, click?
It's a smooth volume control. And
Okay.
when you play with it, it's almost like a crackle, like a.
It's an L pad. So there's an L pad built into the speaker, not a transformer based
Correct.
tapped.
Yes.
Okay, so it's
Mark is
an
playing
8-ohm
hard top.
system.
Guys, it's 8:15, and we're like barely
We need to
through
move along.
the document.
All right, so the
Sorry.
next, okay, so when we go back to our priorities, the next one is lighting. I think we have lighting pretty well covered. It looks like a well-lit room. Pretty even lighting, and you have control over intensities, so I think we're okay for lighting for now. Next one is cameras, and so there are no cameras in the space. And after that is video switching. There is no video switching currently in the space. Projection. We've heard that you have a projector that you have on a roll-around cart, and you've been using the sanctuary wall. And if the walls are like a gold tone, is that right? Let me go back and find, yep, like a yellow gold tone.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after projection would be control systems and then training. So those are the 8 top priorities.
So if
music
we could,
production would be a subtopic. We talked about music performances in the room. And let's see, remote production, online tech roles, streaming sound, video software, file storage, this hearing assistance. Now, hearing assistance, do you have people who rely on hearing assistance in the congregation currently?
We have people who would like to be using the hearing assistive devices. We've gotten mixed reviews about the quality of them.
Okay. And that would be it. So let's see if we have any questions at this point. Joanna?
I wanted to ask about training, actually, more of a human resources thing. It sounds like Christiana and Russ and RJ, the 3 of you are basically the technical crew?
No.
No. Who does the tech there then?
It's a great question. So Christiana is actually our religious educator, who also.
But I've been doing the Zoom tech.
Yeah, she's
Okay,
been
all
on
right.
Zoom tech, and also has a degree in film studies and all that stuff. So
I'm a trained television producer from many years ago, so
Oh, okay.
that's where yeah.
And RJ can tell you what his background is, but he hasn't specifically been on the tech team. But RJ?
Yeah, my background is I'm an IT security consultant.
Got it.
And Russ is my AV person during pandemic. He's my one and only.
This is the tech team.
Because we stream out of our guest bedroom.
Sanctuary.
Yeah.
This bedroom.
Guest bedroom, yes.
And my son, who made that brief appearance, is now an audio engineer, but spent 2.5 years as tech in this sanctuary room.
Okay.
And Russ was on the tech team in the sanctuary as well. And we have a few other people, other people that are on this team, sort of our planning for going forward. One is film. I don't know what you call Dan, a film.
He's a film producer, but he teaches film production. So he's
film production. And Justin, who's a professional AV installer in school systems and so forth.
school systems, theaters, like that.
Yeah.
So you've got a good team you've got the potential to have lots of people to tap into.
And there are concerns about, setting up whatever we set up, making sure that we don't need too many volunteers every Sunday, because that would get onerous for this size congregation.
Of course.
So
we could probably get 2 people on a regular basis, I think. So.
That would be good. So we do have one question from our attendees. John Lake of Silver Spring asked, what about the current system that you have do you like? Is there any aspects of your current system that you do like?
I was trying to clarify if he was asking that to the panelists or to the people that run the system in Georgia.
Well, either could answer, I guess.
You go.
I think it's an excellent question for you guys because it helps us figure out where your pain points are.
Well, something that I've learned just from the beginning of this assessment today is I think we like the fact that the speakers that we have do in fact cover the room and give us quality sound in our space.
Yes.
So yeah, that would be one thing.
I can't speak to any of that other equipment because I don't work with it.
But
We like our lighting.
from your perspective as a minister.
As a minister, I have people every Sunday who help me be heard.
And that's all she needs to know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and the lighting too. I think the lighting in the room is really good.
Lighting is really good, yeah. And I think
Flexible
the
and it's
acoustics are-
adjustable and yeah, and it
Okay.
yeah. And even once we introduce cameras, I think the lighting in the room is satisfactory for that.
Oh, just out of curiosity, is the mix location also like it right behind you is where all those dimmers are,
No.
or are they someplace else in the room?
You know, this is the mixer is at the right rear, and the dimmers are at the center rear, right at the entrance to the room.
Got it.
The one good thing is that right behind the mixer location is kind of a storeroom basically, which has a lot of stuff in it, including spare audio gear, which could be, modified in a way to support what we do next.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'd be a great place for a network cabinet. If you have,
Likely.
The MDF is going right there.
yeah, it's a perfect place for it.
Heard represent.
Let's see what else is about it that has been good. I think the choir pickup could be better. We sometimes get good pickup from those mics, and the way the mixer's had been set up before I started working with it, the things had been set to the input levels had been set such that when you zero out the sliders, you were getting what an expected level, but that always didn't seem to carry through when we were actually doing the recordings. So having better choir sound recording would definitely be a benefit.
Well, and part of the problem with the choir is that those speakers were put in there when we had 2 rows. We had basically 12 seats, and the choir got a little larger, so we added a front row, which is actually in front of those speakers.
And when you said speakers, you really mean?
I'm sorry, I mean microphones.
Microphones,
I
yeah,
apologize.
I
So the
thought-
microphones were great for a 2-row choir, but for a 3-row choir, and possibly, I pray we expand that choir even more. We're already talking about where we might move it or how we might turn it or something, but
Yeah, the sopranos are always down center, and you don't want to hear too much of them anyway. So
Stop.
actually our sopranos are on the back row. Our sopranos are on the back row, altos on the front, and
Okay.
I think that leads me to a question I wanted to ask to get. How fixed are you in the location of everything in the room?
It's a
Particularly
great
when
question. It's,
particularly when we start thinking about the location of cameras, because one of the nice things, or the convenient thing with the fact that we're going back, is that this is an opportunity to almost say, well, we've had to reorganize this anyway. And it may be this is the time to just say, I'm looking at the picture I'm looking at the moment, and I can see, am I right? There's raised chairs there in that corner.
yes.
They stepped. So you could, as an example, you could put the choir in the stepped chair.
That's where the
There's
choir.
the choir loft.
They are
That's
in.
where
That's where they are,
Okay.
Leah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought they were there.
Good idea. Yeah.
But you could also really rearrange things, especially if you don't use the pulpit that much, Jan. You could move your whole worship to that section right there, and then have the choir be able to spread out in the front section. They're going to need to be a distance away from each other. They may not all be able to sit together too. Depends on COVID rules. But I think, yeah, you could. I think you could totally rethink the way the space is used entirely. Shift your worship to that spot in the corner. I don't know. Just thinking.
Yeah, something to think about.
All right, yeah. So that's a really good place to start, because the configuration of the room is really going to influence how we think
Speaker
about
placement.
loudspeakers
Yeah.
and microphones.
And cameras.
Well, and one thing is that with the cameras, I would like to have one section be non-video, so there are people who are sensitive to having themselves or their children or whatever on screen.
Right.
So there'd be a section roped off that would not be visible on camera. And Yeah, I mean, the space has flexibility, and we just have to have some conversations about attachment to the setup a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's Jan. I think that's always the problem. That but the advantage you have is this is the new norm. If you go back exactly as it is now, then people will go back to exactly, if this is the opportunity to sort of reset something,
Right.
and I know it's a bit sounding like we're forcing things.
Yeah. What we actually
decide.
talked about was moving the piano to where the choir loft is. And moving the choir further down that side between the sound system and where the choir is now, so that it would basically, we could have a little wider space for the choir to grow. But that was just the choir director and I just started trying to imagine what's possible with that.
I think the good thing about it is a very flexible space. The only thing that we're really tied into is that worship needs to face that way because of the chalice window on the wall. But other than that, it is a very amorphous space. So
It also, I mean, it may not really matter, but just to know this is our only big room. This is also our fellowship hall. So any events we have, this room becomes the space for meals and parties and all of that. So
Now, I know that you like the in the round sort of setup, and you've gotten used to that, and people like looking at each other. I just want to throw out there, though, that similar to Leo's comments, you do inject inherent problems when you do anything in the round. It causes lighting issues, it causes visibility issues, and it certainly causes sound issues. None of them can't be overcome, but it does make all of the tasks a little bit more difficult to try and overcome them. So if instead of truly, maybe got there 270 degrees, 180 degrees of coverage, if everybody were to bend a little bit so that you're still, for example, Circle of First Universalist Society in Franklin, we're in the round, but it's more of an arch and we're all kind of facing one direction. But if you're sitting on the either side, you can see people on the either side. You can look at each other, but we're not bent around quite that much. And that solves an awful lot of issues by just winging out a little bit and moving your focus down to the end of the room. All of a sudden, tons of problems go away.
Yeah.
So you might consider, you can still walk around, you can still, get the eye contact and the congregation can see each other, but you might think of softening that curve a little bit just to help the tech.
Yeah, another benefit there or challenge is sight lines to large screen displays, whether it be a flat screen on a TV.
You
or
have to sit
projection
sideways
somewhere.
to look, yeah.
That's the other idea with moving the choir, because right now the choir really can't see the PowerPoint presentation we project. We project on the wall right behind the piano.
Oh, okay.
And we're thinking that what we might need in order to have a truly integrated service concurrent with the people who are off-site is maybe run a second computer with a Zoom link open and maybe have that one projected on the other side of the room so that people can see each other, and if one of them is offering a reflection in the service, you'd see them. So we're wanting to make this truly an interactive experience for people who are off-site.
Yeah, one option for this particular configuration of chairs would not to use the front wall, but to use the side walls, both of them.
Side walls aren't really, they're all windows.
They're windows.
Yeah. Well,
And you're going to have to open, well, depending upon your regulations, either open them or have something.
Yep.
All right. So is this where we play consultants in our office?
Let's talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
So
So the seating configuration is going to play a large part in our recommendations for loudspeakers, first of all. What kind of loudspeakers, where they would be, how to cover the seating area we need to know where the seating area is going to be before we can determine what speakers are going to be appropriate and where they would be.
Yeah, in our preliminary meeting, we discussed two basic options. One was localized sound by doing a more expansive version of what they have now, adding more speakers underneath the overhangs. And then Jay started coming up with designs for end loading the room and firing back from, for example, flanking the stained glass.
However, upon listening, to the conversation, you're not unhappy with what you have.
Right.
Yeah, they're pretty happy with it. So
If I were coming in, from scratch, and you said, "Hey, we need a sound system for the room," I wouldn't do what you have.
Right.
I can tell you that. That you're
But
not.
if it ain't broke.
What's that?
But if it ain't broke,
well, it is broke.
Well,
In a minor way.
Yeah.
Consider
Yeah.
this. Consider this. How were those speakers placed in the ceiling when the building was built 30 years ago?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
don't
So
know
the
the answer.
Yeah.
30-year-old.
I don't know for sure, but I think, I don't know.
So the 30-year-old speakers of unknown type or condition in a ceiling that they could be covered in debris. They could have blown.
well, yeah. I mean, surrounds could
They
have
could be really
disintegrated.
dirty.
Certainly,
We don't
Yeah.
know what they are. Plus the feedback problem. And at 30 years, it's probably time for an upgrade.
Okay.
So go ahead. and
I'm
show-
still looking. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joanne.
No, at first I was also going to say, if you would I would put more money then into the mixer and the other parts of the audio system that need to be overhauled than to address the loudspeakers. But it is worth showing them where and what type of, I guess the line array type of speaker that we were thinking about putting up. Have Marty show them where we would put that, and maybe show them an example of either the Biamp ones or the JBL ones or the Bose ones, just to give them an idea. But of course, all of that depends on if it was.
Well, it depends.
facing.
Is the seating? It
all depends on the
Let's get back to the beginning. So, we've got a room with flexible seating. You have a configuration that you're using, and it works for most things. It sounds like you rearrange it when you need to. For some events, you've made the comment that the choir's kind of outgrown the space, and maybe you want to. Start moving and reconfiguring. When those things happen, the coverage of the speakers that you have now may not work for a reconfiguration. I would say if it was a flat ceiling with uniform ceiling speaker distribution, and you had the ability to turn down or turn off speaker sections for certain things, which is not uncommon to do in multi-purpose spaces, that type of system, if everything's in good shape, and you have the coverage you like, and you're confident stuff's going to stick around and work for a while, that would be one situation. So I think certainly to Marty's point, 30 years old is an amount of service. I've designed systems that have worked, run for 20. I would say pretty typically when people are designing systems now, they're planning on 5 to 10 years of service. And go ahead, Leo.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm trying to work out is this a suspended ceiling?
Yes.
Yes.
But it looks like to me that there is running cable trunking. That's what I use. I think there's another word in the US. The white stuff is running around
Raceway?
the outside. Yeah. Why is it
Raceway.
running?
I think
why
that
is
might be
running
molding.
Is that running underneath the suspended ceiling? Normally, if you're going to run cabling, you run it above it. The reason I'm just asking
I don't
is,
think we have any cabling on the.
Yeah, I think that's just.
I think it's just
ceiling
molding. I think it's just
Wall
decorative
molding.
molding.
do you think
Yeah.
it's
it's decorative trim.
It's trim.
Okay. All right. Because going back to exactly what Jay is saying, to change this around, these speakers may all be wired up in parallel. Or
we
wired up
have
in a
no
way.
idea how these are
We have no
wired.
idea.
Yeah, no,
But
it's-
and that you would want it so that you could actually, if you're going to leave them in the locations, can enable the ability to control each of the speakers or the sets so that you can change the balance and just reinforcements.
yeah, I think
So
where
why-
my mind was heading was whatever happens, you may just want to shift some speakers around a little bit. They might be in not necessarily the best tiles. Look at creating an even more uniform setup with smaller sets of speakers. I'm not being very articulate here. Some of the issues could be you could cover the room nice and evenly, but get another tile or two up on that ceiling so that when you bring the microphone over underneath it, you don't get feedback anymore. You've distanced it, you're covering it from another place, you're more diffuse, rather than being, right in line with a loudspeaker of unknown type right above that little grill.
Challenge in mounting speakers in the ceiling is that we need to have tight control over the dispersion or the coverage angle of each speaker, and they need to be oriented in such a way that the center of the room where the round table is a quiet zone.
No,
Because
it's a multi-use space, so you have to cover that space as well.
Yeah,
You
but
might
if
be able to
if you
shut
could
off
select-
speakers during certain, yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point, and that may argue against point source speakers in the ceiling, because unless you can turn off that center space and only that center space, it's always going to be at the risk of feedback. Now we also considered line array speakers mounted on the wall, on the front wall. Like, think about here.
You got to share your screen, Marty.
Oh, right.
Jan had her hand up, so I think
Yeah,
she's going to make a
thank
comment.
you.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just, there were some other things that I haven't heard mentioned, like that we want to have our projector mounted from the ceiling, and yeah, I don't.
And there
know.
actually is an HDMI cable that was run up there years ago for that purpose. It's hasn't been used.
And we could run it over to the other side to have a projector on that side as well, so that we could have two things happening at once.
As Leo was alluding to, having, I think it was Leo. Anyway, having a suspended ceiling does allow. It's not easy, but it does allow you to add additional cabling.
Yeah.
Yeah, cabling is definitely an advantage with that ceiling.
Which is why I asked if it was a plenum ceiling, how
Right.
difficult it was going to be. But that's just
Right.
a matter of buying plenum wire.
So speakers up on the ceiling, are going to. Let me get back to my pen here. Going to be pointed this way, or up here pointed this way. Which is good because that avoids the center of the room. But then, and then you'll have speakers pointed this way. But then when you rearrange the chairs for a different kind of event, such as a concert or something, the center of the room is not going to be well covered because we want to create that quiet zone for services.
Yeah, and what were those things you put on the wall over there?
Yeah, so if we were to put line array speakers up here on the wall, two of them, so there's the difference between a point source speaker, it basically radiates in a conical fashion, so vertically and horizontally, like a megaphone would, right?
Yeah.
There are some times when, depending on the kind of speaker, sometimes instead of round, and I'm talking about the pattern that a speaker puts out sound or radiates sound. So some of them put out sound in a very round, conical fashion. Some of them put out sound where it's where the coverage pattern is wider than it is tall, right? And so that helps, and that would be from the mid frequencies to the higher frequencies. Lower frequencies are generally always going to be rounder. A column speaker, a line array speaker like this, has a very different kind of radiation pattern, different dispersion characteristics. First of all, they can have a very vertically flat output, so they're almost like a pancake, right? They're wide, so the dispersion pattern would be something like, it'd be very wide, but very narrow in the vertical. And so if we push this to the top, can I do that? Push this to the top, then the pattern would come out.
Well, the problem, Marty, is that if you do that, then you run in some. But
Well, that's our.
No, but I was missing something. So
It's also their projection surface.
Allow me to continue. It's wide and flat like this, so we can cover the entire room and not have sound bouncing off the ceilings, or these are ceiling tiles, so they would absorb sound pretty well. However, the other benefit is that this kind of loudspeaker has a whole bunch of very, very small loudspeaker cones up the vertical. It could have 16 to 24 or more little tiny loudspeakers. And the benefit there, as Jay was explaining in our Sunday meeting, is that the output level of any one of these speakers is quite low. It's when they sum together that they do their magic in this pattern and their volume. So you could walk up to one of these speakers with a microphone and it would be extremely feedback resistant. I mean, you could walk right up to it and not get feedback.
And they're known for clarity of speech.
And for clarity of speech, and some of them are actually quite good for music, and if you add a subwoofer to them, they become excellent for music. And so the benefit of this is that we can cover the entire room regardless of the configuration and minimize the potential for feedback and provide excellent sound. That would also be a benefit for the choir microphones, which are over here. And if you were to set up a coffee house with musicians in the middle of the floor with microphones, that would also be, you'd also get plenty of gain in your speakers before you get feedback. So that's an option that we seriously considered, and I think may still be a viable option. But the configuration of the chairs will still influence our final recommendation.
Sure. And is there another place to put those other than on our main wall? So aesthetically, it's questionable, and that is our only space where we can project our video. And
I would say two things, Jan. First, you may or you may not want to project onto a wall. It's not the best surface to be projecting onto, because half of the quality of the projector is lost in the screen. If you get a better screen, that would come, but that's another story. But what I was going to say is you may not even need to mount these speakers, because some of them can sit in a subwoofer, and they might be portable. They might be able to move around the room. Jay, am I speaking correctly? At least I know the JBLs do.
Well, it's not. So I guess there are two things. I think probably the first is there are other ways to handle loudspeakers, but there may not be other places to mount screens and or project that are going to be able to give you the sight lines and the image size that you need for projection. So although I've always been audio first over everything, in this case, there may not, there may not be a better alternative for projection, then that should probably get the get the priority for getting the real estate, and other options could be looked at for audio.
If I could horrify the audio people in the room for a minute, I'm going to show you our sanctuary.
But do they have to be mounted is my question.
Towers, right?
They don't necessarily have to be mounted.
You could pole mount,
They
but
don't have to be, yeah.
pole mounting
However-
creates a whole litany of problems.
That's not even what I'm
So,
talking
But we don't.
yeah, you're talking about pole mounts.
Wherever we place the loudspeakers, they will be calibrated and adjusted for balanced sound and for balanced sound and coverage in the room. Once you move those loudspeakers to any place else in the room, they will no longer be calibrated.
So this is the sanctuary at First Universalist Society. As you can see, it's the room's about 80 feet long. Behind the pulpit there on the chancel, that's a long window wall. You can see everybody's set up in sort of an arc. It's lighting above, etc. The loudspeakers, though, Jay will be horrified, but our Cambridge Sound Works, Cambridge or Boston Acoustic, I can't remember which. They're actually in-wall home theater speakers that we put transformers on.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that there are 4 of them running across the back wall. You can't see one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 6-inch variety of that loudspeaker. And then flanking the stage, you can just barely see there's one 8-incher up here above the light and another 8-incher on the other side. That room has completely even sound all throughout it. We have never had an ounce of feedback issues in it. And I park high gain condenser microphones anywhere on that floor, and it doesn't matter. We're actually quite surprised at the quality of music coming out of those loudspeakers. For the Circle of Friends Coffee House, we use pole mount loudspeakers, and there's a subwoofer and whatnot. We clear the stage and we set up on that stage. But for everyday services and for music during the services, we just use those ceiling, speakers,
Right.
and they're on 70-volt lines, believe it or not. This is why I keep thinking they like their ceiling speaker arrangement. They're getting even sound. If we just change up the loudspeakers, and I'm not advocating for the speakers we use. These got donated to us, and that's why they went in the ceiling 20 years ago when we built the room.
Yeah.
But choosing the right ceiling speakers, placing them in the right places, in our case, oh my God, we just threw them in and guessed, and we got lucky. So to Jay's point, there are other ways to deal with sound.
There are other ways to deal with sound. The other thing is if you permanently locate, speakers in one, for example, if we go to the chancel wall, that doesn't serve you well if you decide to rearrange locations for anything.
Right, and that's what we do in this room. As you can see, it's a multi-space.
In a multi-purpose space, having an overhead distributed speaker system gives you the most flexibility, I think. The next most flexibility would be if you move loudspeakers around as you needed to. And to Joanna's point, if you could certainly do that. People do that all the time, bringing in temporary speakers. Would they be as well matched if you move them 90 degrees from the front to the side? And to Marty's point, yeah, when you move things around, you're not going to get the same coverage. You've gone and moved loudspeakers. So things are not necessarily always good. They're not going to be consistent when you do that. Doesn't mean it won't be good. It can certainly, Russ, we've moved speakers around in venues, and you adjust, you balance, you equalize, and you do your best to cover the seating area as defined.
Yeah.
I think if we move on to the other areas of the audio system that we were thinking about upgrading, maybe we can come back to loudspeakers.
Sure.
Well, we will have to come back to loudspeakers once we have a better understanding
Right.
of
And there's
what the
cameras
seating
to add.
arrangement is.
Yeah.
But to address that, to just put another viewpoint on the consideration of display screens versus loudspeakers, that can be arranged. I mean, if the center of the wall, just to left or right of the pulpit, were to have a screen on it, and let me share this again. So if there were a screen here, for instance, or here, and we could put speakers here and here, you know, that could work fine. But, you know, I'm not close to the idea of ceiling speakers, provided we could find ones that will work well. Okay, so this is a bit of a challenge with the seating configuration here, with the ceiling line here, with choir over here on this side. Speakers that are going to provide even coverage around the room so that everybody can hear and everybody can be mic'd at the same time. It's, you know, it's an interesting challenge. So we'll see what we come up with. After we're done here over the next couple of weeks, the panelists will continue to talk and discuss and before we make our final recommendations. And sometimes, you know, it may take somebody who has some skill and knowledge of acoustics to come in and take a look and listen in this room in particular, because that could be important information to have. So other areas of the sound system that we would recommend upgrading, the mixer, obviously.
I would, why don't we start at the source?
Microphones.
Yeah, go right back. We'll go through the system right from the source.
All right.
Yeah, they've got a few microphones that are worth keeping. The rest they should probably consider either improving their mic trunk or replacing them. I don't know what frequency the Audio-Technica wireless is on. It may be on a sold frequency, and they have to upgrade anyway to stay compliant with the law.
Right.
So there's that concern. I don't know where the Bluetooth receivers are, but if they're not something on the order of a Terotex or something like that, the Bluetooth receivers could be an issue. I would, if Bluetooth is going to be something that they want to use and they want to be able to use it for multiple spots in the room, I would probably advocate for multiple Bluetooth hotspots around the room, 3, for example, 1 on each of the 3 walls, and bring those back to the console. That'll prevent the dropouts. It's a professional quality device.
My understanding was the only reason for the Bluetooth was for the projector.
Yeah.
I was seeing a total of 3 Bluetooth receivers. I saw BT1, BT2, and BT3.
Well,
Is it only for the projector?
So there's 2, but I'm not. Who knows? There maybe there's a third one labeled, but there's 2 receivers. What they are being used for, and that doesn't say they couldn't be used for something else, but they're being used for is getting an audio signal from the laptop to the room sound system, so that video being displayed can have its accompanying sound. That's what they're for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And why are there 2? Is it left and right, or are there 2 different devices that are sending audio?
I think this is a backup. It's a primary and backup kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's much better ways to do that, and we can guide you on what to use for the technology there than Bluetooth.
Yeah,
Well,
if we're
well,
talking
you
about
can do
installing, if we're talking about permanent projection, and that would be a good idea because that facilitates interaction between your online congregation and your in-person congregation, we'll be talking about installing a projection system.
And
Once
the
we have
the online congregation also needs to be able to be heard. So that has to be fed into the sound system.
right.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay.
In terms of the visuals, though, you want to be able to show the visuals that you have been showing. So mood visuals, artwork, hymn lyrics, any other readings, anything that you'd want to show, including people who are present from Zoom. So we would be looking at or recommending installing a projection system. Once the projector is installed, there's no need for the cart to roll around.
Right.
That projector would be wired back to your control desk, and there would be a computer that's driving the video. That computer then would output its sound directly into the mixing console. So there would be no need for the Bluetooth unless you wanted to enable people to be able to play music from their phones, which can come in handy during, other types of events like weddings and other parties.
Yeah.
And that would also interface with the mixer rather, so we can figure that out.
Let me throw in though, if you have events where you might want to have a guest laptop set up on a lectern, and then that laptop was fed to the projector, you need to have an accommodation for that as well, and that could either be wired or wireless.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we do have events of that type occasionally when we have speakers. Yeah.
That they just want to roll up with the laptop, open it, and connect. Yep.
Yeah, you could use a ClickShare, you could use an AirMedia, you could use any number of products for doing wireless computer sharing. Yep.
Right. Cool. All right. So wired mics. I would recommend maybe upgrading the choir mics to something that's more directional. If those hanging mics are what I think they are, I believe they're Shure's or something close to it. They have a fairly wide pickup angle, which would lower the gain before feedback.
Yeah, we'd need to know the model number because you can buy the Shures in different patterns. So we'd need to know the model number.
And literally any one of a number of high quality miniature condensers for picking up choir.
Right.
That might not even be where the choir is anymore, right? I thought they were thinking about relocating the choir entirely.
Well, regardless,
wherever they are, you're still gonna, I think the other question is, how large will the choir configuration be? Do you want to, would you be doing events where maybe you have a guest choir come in or
an interfaith service where it's an interfaith choir?
Right. And
yeah, we've had that happen. We had a guest choir came in with 30 people, and we had to just take up one side of the room.
Yeah, and I mean, there are multiple ways to deal with that. You could rent microphones and put them on boom stands, and you'll need extra inputs in your mixing console to cover them, or you say, this is the choir area today, and this is what we need for most of our services. But when we have more, we've got coverage out to extend it.
How many channels were in the Snake?
So I think we can
forget it.
We can talk about upgrading to a digital mixer.
Yeah,
correct?
if we go with a digital mixer, there'll be a digital Snake.
18 in, do you think?
Yeah, but if we can save them $1,000 by not having them buy a digital Snake and use the existing analog one, there's nothing wrong with that. We use a digital desk with an analog Snake to the stage, so it doesn't.
Well, sure. The existing Snake only has 9 inputs though. So
okay, all right.
It's not going to be sufficient.
That's why I asked.
Right. So wired microphones. We've got the pulpit. We've got the piano. We'll have choir microphones, all wired. Wireless microphones. So you have head-worn microphone for the minister. It would be good to have up to 3 head-worn microphones available for other types of events. A few handheld microphones. They can come really handy for last-minute musicians. They're great for vocals. If you have solo vocal with a choir behind them, putting a wireless microphone on a stand is very convenient. It's easy to move around. Don't have to worry about wires tripping over each other. Wireless microphones are, of course, more expensive than wired microphones, but the convenience factor can make up for it. So we can, add that to the recommendations, and then the congregation would be, free to make adjustments according to their budget availability.
We should put together a mic trunk for them. It doesn't take a lot of money or a lot of mics to actually be able to do an awful lot. So we should probably put together a mic trunk for them.
Yeah.
May I ask a question about the, you're talking about choir mics, and the choir tends to be sort of a distributed group, a wide group anyway. What we were talking about, narrow patterns for pickup, but isn't that contradictory to what?
Well, it's a relative term. So one of the things that we want to know before choosing microphones and where they are would be, as I think it was Mark who said, what's the configuration of the choir? How wide would it typically be, or what would the minimum and maximum be for most services? There will be, of course, exceptions where you'll have special services with combined choirs from multiple churches and lots of people. And as Jay was saying, you could have additional microphones either on hand or rentable that you can put on stands for those occasions. But for the typical, every day to Christmas Eve service, what would be the confines of the choir that you set out to be? And then we'll figure out what kind of microphones and how many there should be to cover that space, right?
And you'll get a better idea of that if you come to Monday's audio meeting where we cover microphones.
That's right.
We'll cover types and patterns.
I think that's actually a really good point. We've got let's move off microphones.
Yeah.
Because they can always add microphones at a later date.
That's right. On the source side, it says no direct boxes. I would encourage you to get a couple of direct boxes so you can plug in a guitar rather than having to microphone it and set all that stuff up. They just jack in and go, solves feedback issues, and you can get really, really good direct boxes for really, really cheap.
Yeah.
Sources, I think that's all the sources, isn't it?
One of the important points to keep in mind as we move forward is that, when you're not streaming, you don't need to mic everything in the sanctuary because they produce their own sounds. So electric guitar amplifier, piano, they don't need to be amplified typically in a room because they make plenty of noise on their own. When you are streaming, or when you're streaming to an overflow, or when you're feeding audio to an overflow room, everything has to be mic'd and everything has to be mixed, right? Now, you still don't want to amplify or mix everything in the room for the same reasons. And so you're actually building two different mixes. And so the mixer has to have that flexibility, and the people operating have to have an understanding of how that gets done. And so one of the things about that is that you need to have more inputs and more microphones and direct boxes so that you can have all of those sound sources being fed into the mixer so that they can be mixed into the stream. So we have microphones, we have direct boxes. We talked about how to get those sources to the mixer, and currently there's a 9-channel analog copper snake that is not likely to be have enough inputs, so we would replace that with a digital snake. Now it's a digital mixer, and so the inputs and outputs get extended from the console to the stage on a Cat5 wire. And so the connection is digital throughout, which increases the performance and increases the audio quality, improves the audio quality, reduces any opportunity for interference from radio noise sources or lighting ballasts or anything that even phones, cell phones, that can cause noise in analog snakes. So now we get to the mixer. We want a mixer that is going to be fairly easy to use, but extremely flexible. Some of the great things about digital mixers is that you can program them with preset scenes to cover any number of typical situations. So you might have a Sunday service with a choir and no band, and you push a button on the mixer and everything is set up for you. All your channels are configured, the levels are configured as starting points. All your routing to your outputs are configured. Very easy, very accommodating. You don't have to think about setting up your separate mix buses for streaming and for your loudspeakers in the room, because once you do that you set it up once, you store it, and it gets saved. Now you have a different service where you do have a band and you have additional inputs. You have another preset scene for that. So digital mixers have this huge advantage. And we find you something that has a appropriate number of inputs, appropriate number of outputs, you're good to go. Moving on from the mixer would be distribution. So you have any number of loudspeakers in the room that we are to be determined. You have several other areas in the facility that you want to feed sound to. You have the streaming output, and you'll want to be recording as well.
Marty, Crystal's got a hand up.
Sorry, go ahead, Crystal.
You're on mute, Crystal.
Thank you. I forget sometimes that I have my on cord mute. So we have a few questions that we really should get to, and we're at 9:08, so we should be landing the plane. So first off, it looks like what effects will the ceiling fans, and I think this is a really good thing to think about, ceiling fans having on the audio and installation of the cameras?
Well, we haven't got the cameras yet.
Right.
And in audio, I think they would just spread the sound around as the fans are turning and just distribute sound all over the room.
So you don't think there's going to be an issue?
I don't think that at all.
All right.
I think that as long as the ceiling fans are rotating at a slow enough speed so that they're just moving air around very slowly, which is really their intention, to just move. They're not cooling devices. They're meant as convection.
Depends on how they're using it.
I would offer, don't put a ceiling fan between the loudspeaker and the listener. As long as we don't do that, everything's fine.
Okay.
That's where they are, though.
Okay, can I just ask on the ceiling fans? There's going to be potentially a change. People are going to want to see visible air movement because of where we are, and people are expecting to see visible air movement. Do you use the ceiling fans at the moment? How much are they needed for cooling?
Pretty much use them every Sunday. We use them almost every Sunday, I think. Right. I think every Sunday we use them.
And
do
you have air?
Sorry, the ceiling fans are necessary in the space.
Right.
Okay.
So they are used for cooling, and you run them at full tilt.
Are they noisy?
Well, but they are slow turning ceiling fans, and they are remarkably effective considering.
And they're quiet.
They are run on low, and they're pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Very quiet, yeah.
Is there air conditioning in the room?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're just air movement. Fair enough.
Yeah.
How about this? The next question is, could you consider hanging a screen that rolls up and down from the ceiling instead of in?
We would consider something if it was aesthetically pleasing. Somebody tried donating one that was not so much. So
this is a really big thing to me, Jan, about the aesthetics. You've got a nice room, but it's also, I would argue, it's quite a tired room in some things, particularly the ceiling. So the ceiling looks very tired. And I'm just wondering where, if we're starting to move things around, it could make a big difference to how you see the room sitting.
Yeah.
And it may be that we need to look at, because I can hear your sort of concerns when you were saying, well, put some speakers next to your lovely stained glass window, and you're like, no, leave it alone.
It's also that, I mean, it's hard to describe what happens when you walk into that space. It is a really, really lovely feeling in that space. And some of that is the arrangement and all of that. Some of it is just that they're lovely people in that space. But that main wall is the primary. All the other walls are interrupted by a lot of windows. We have art shows on these walls. We have art shows that are behind the choir and on the front wall to the far left by that other speaker. So, I'll stop there, but just, yes, aesthetics is very important to me and to the congregation. Having it feel, I think when people return, they're going to want it to feel familiar. It might be a little different, but it needs to feel familiar.
Right. I think the good argument is that you're using the space for other things and that you want to keep the wall kind of available for those things, like with regard to art shows. That's an excellent use.
Art shows. And we've had presenters come in and, Sierra Club and so forth, come in and do presentations on that wall and things like that. So it's not just,
and that's where you're looking.
screens would work. It just, you need, or they have paint you can use that creates a screen on the wall. We can consider some of those possibilities.
Yeah, and I want to apologize. That's something that I really should have asked about and talked about much earlier on in the conversation. Is about the congregation's feeling about the aesthetic of the room, because that's a very important thing in any sanctuary.
Yes.
And yes, we want to be conscious of making every effort to minimize the aesthetic impact on a room. However, at some point we have to come to terms with the fact that we are trying to make the room functional for purposes that it was not functional before.
Right. And we're doing things that they never dreamed of doing.
Right.
So it sounds like the big ask for you guys is going to be like camera placement, to make sure about that you're getting the room. And like you said, you want to keep a section of the room separate so that it's not visible. Are you while still maintaining the seating, or are you looking to widen that out? Because
we might look at how we can widen it out a little bit, but it's tough to still fit the seating in. It's anyway. Yeah. The cameras are a big deal, and also any like what was it last week's subject, the
video switchers
and things like that, things that can minimize the number of volunteers we need.
Right.
And our budget is a little
the question I was going to ask and didn't.
Yeah, it's been on my mind since the moment we started. So I think we could easily gather $5,000 towards this. We might be able to get up to $8,000. That would be going to certain people in the congregation and inviting investment in this effort. The endowment fund has said they'll give us some money, but it'll be piecing it together. So
it may evolve. It'd be nice if we could do things in pieces.
Like, what are the first things what are the high priorities, and where would we,
The good news is Blackmagic is very, very affordable, and Stream Decks are becoming much easier to find, so they're not quite as expensive.
Yeah, the highest investment could be in cameras.
Yeah.
We're using 2 cameras now, and that's been fun.
And a computer, though. You need a new
cameras, computer.
You really do kind of need a better computer.
We need a new computer, yes.
Cameras, computer, and whether or not you want to mount the cameras, we would suggest mounting them, especially since you have that great ceiling that it's easy to hide all your cabling up there.
Yeah.
That's the only question I have with regard to rotating, because there was some discussion of rotating the pulpit into the corner would be line of sight potentially conflicting with.
Yeah, I don't see us
Uh,
moving the pulpit. I don't
okay.
think we're going to move the pulpit.
That's what I wanted to make sure of. So it sounds like it's a straight shot down the middle. We've just got to figure out a way to mount that into a drop ceiling situation when we have no idea what's above it.
There is,
Piece of cake.
Not too hard.
and there is a wall in the back, you know, above the doors. There's space.
Right, but you want to also keep it in such a way that you don't have the entirety of your audience visible on the camera. I mean,
Which would be an argument for 2 cameras, possibly, Crystal.
Well, we want a camera for doing close in, and we want, yeah.
Yeah, well, y'all have our the way that the services have been, so you know that we need one for the pulpit, and we need one for the chalice table, and we need one for the choir, and whether that's more than 1 or 2 cameras that are able to swivel on their own or require not.
Like, or GoPros all over.
no.
I would say
Probably
that
not.
really
No.
never.
Or don't go pet cameras either.
Yeah,
I would
no.
say that there's really never an occasion that we will want just a wide shot of the sanctuary. Like that's not going to be the way we're presenting services.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Okay.
So in terms of budget, there are different ways that to think about financing a project. One is raising the money to purchase all the gear outright. There's leasing, and then there's subscription model.
Yep.
Traditionally, most churches have always, and most people have always just raised the money to buy the equipment outright. Sometimes there'll be a leasing arrangement where you'll enter into a term for leasing the equipment that can then be purchased for $1 or something similar at the end of the lease. And then there's the newer subscription model. Subscription, we're becoming very accustomed to subscriptions for software and our phones and cars and all kinds of things. And it's an interesting prospect, especially for growing congregations. It's something worth considering. We can discuss that, what the differences are at another time.
Okay.
So cameras, 2 cameras, I think maybe 3 cameras would be a good idea. Which ones, would depend on discussions, positions, and budget. Camera switching, the ATEM mini camera switching is very affordable. There's software switching, which can be free or low cost, and sometimes it makes sense to use both hardware and software together. Let's see, and
A new amp. We've got to just finish up audio.
right, finishing up
a
audio,
digital
so we went
mixer,
through the mixer.
an amp,
We
and
want
a distribution amp. right?
So digital mixer. Then, depending on which loudspeakers and how many that we decide on, a loudspeaker processing device would be advisable. And this is a digital device that has multiple inputs, multiple outputs that can manage each of the loudspeakers both in the sanctuary and in other parts of the facility, to provide each of them with individual volume control, individual equalization, time
Any digital
delays.
desk will have that in it.
Some digital desk will have that in it. They
Yeah,
don't
but
typically
I'll still
have a
fight you
lot of
not to use that.
Yeah, I know you. I know where you're coming from, Jay. Yeah.
So basically, we're looking at new computer, probably 2 new cameras, mounted, new projector, potentially.
Possibly new screen.
Possibly new screen
New
or
screen.
changing the wall so that we've got a paint on that that does a better job.
Alternatively, one or two carts with large displays so that they can wheel them out of the way and they don't have to worry about taking art down or changing the wall color or any of that.
And out in the lobby,
And when
we wanted-
when they move the room around, the display can move to a new location. So possibly displays on, and abandon the projector altogether.
It all depends on
There,
what they're
there's really not room for that.
There's not room.
No.
Okay.
and
so-
lobby, video and audio in the lobby.
I see a stack of chairs against the wall. The cart can't fit where that stack of chairs is.
I think that's probably where service people sit, isn't it?
Yeah, there's two chairs by the pulpit. That's where the minister and the worship associate sit.
Okay.
Then there's the piano and there's the choir. I'm not sure what stack of chairs you're.
Well, to the left of the pulpit, there's open space where a display could sit, right? On the
To the left of the pulpit is our table of our altar of compassion, which is where our joys and sorrow candles
Candles.
and what's to the left of that?
are. Not a lot of space.
Really? You got people tucked right into that corner?
No, I mean that's
The wall
the
goes.
back wall. You wouldn't have people sitting there.
What?
And
Right. Yeah.
and the screen would be like at the exit door. It would be like there's an exit.
Oh, there's an exit door right there. All right.
Yeah,
That's
there's
what
an
I'm not
exit door in
seeing.
that corner, and there's normally art that hangs on that wall as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's also we can't really tell, but I can see that that's where that's kind of got that weird corner pattern.
Yeah.
It's not a flat wall.
Well, it's a flat wall. It's just not.
Well, it looks like
There's no space off of the photograph edge. There's
Okay.
like, and then there's a door.
And
You're
Crystal, what
saying-
you're seeing is another piece of that weird trim. That wall is flat. There's just that weird trim there.
Okay, so
Got it.
not. It's not.
Got it.
angled out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Scratch that on the displays.
Okay.
Okay. So then it looks like we're looking at an ATEM and a stream
And a
deck.
stream deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we have lots of information to work with.
And potentially upgrading your hearing assistance, because you said
Yeah,
you're getting
assistive.
Yeah. A recommendation on quality hearing assistive devices would be.
because it sounds like you're getting a lot of Bluetooth collision and stuff,
Yeah, it might be. Yeah.
which is no fun.
There are 3 or 4 very good solutions for Listen Assist.
Yeah.
All right. So I think it's time to wrap up the formal part of the show. We can move into the after show, right? So
We ran late.
thank you
Sorry.
to our panelists and our guests today for such a wonderful conversation. This has been really interesting. It's going to be a very fun challenge to work on, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I hope that all of our attendees have enjoyed our time together, found it informative, enlightening, enriching, energizing, and motivating. Watch the Discord for agendas to upcoming shows, where you can find recordings of past shows to review, announcements about upcoming events, and our needs assessment contests. Our third needs assessment contest will be coming up in a few weeks. Next week, we're going to be reviewing the results, our recommendations from the first one we did for the smaller congregation in Mexico. And yeah, let's continue to figure this out. We're all doing this for the first time in our churches, and there are all kinds of new opportunities that this technology offers us. Both for in service and for widening the community, for affecting change out there in the world. Heaven knows we could use some of that.
Yeah.
It's expanding our ministry, right?
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Well, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to
Thank you for
discuss our hopes. So,
Yeah, thank you, Russ and Jan and everybody else who
RJ.
RJ.
thank you, RJ. Thank you, Christiana. So glad you
Yeah.
both came to be part of this.